And then I was at a ceremony and your dad's supposed to go down and put a cap on. I'll never forget that moment when he went down, didn't even give me eye contact, took a cap, just slammed it on my head and walked off. I will always remember that moment. If you go deeper, then what's the lesson behind it? The lesson behind it is there's always already a wound there.
Okay, welcome back to another episode of Wise and Shine. I'm your host Reggie, aka your Chief Financial Coconut.
Hi, Eric here, Mr. Positivity.
And Dawn, budget babe.
And today we are in our new space, right? We're in our new studio, so if you cannot yet tell, it's the whole backdrop is different. It's very China, right? This is for now.
I love it.
For now.
It's so antique.
And then the first interview we did was 1 teacup. Now I see 10 teacups.
Yeah.
Aladdin
And I
teacup.
asked if that tea was drinkable.
Like,
This one is for show one. Is it? Too many sets already. Everything's for show
very
one.
cultural, I feel. Strong Chinese culture. Here.
Just saying, this is our lobby.
Oh, wow.
It's still getting sorted out, but so far I think quite nice lah. Huh? So
Love
for all-
it. You got
for
your
all
own
of you
space.
tuning, yeah, exactly.
Congratulations.
Oh yes. Thank you for all of you tuning in. Just welcome to our new space. We have more content here for everybody, and today we're gonna talk a little bit about something a bit more interesting lah. Because we have Mr. Positive in the room, right? Because today I'm gonna challenge the notion of is it all about positivity, right? Because you want to say something?
Negative emotions could be good.
Yeah, exactly. Because I think there's so much talk about being
Yeah.
positive, and it becomes very motivational, and everyone is talking about it, like your parents, your maybe not the parents, the very old ones, but most of the people in their 30s, 40s, 50s, you will hear them talking about it positive. Even the government's talking about it, right? And there's a general disdain, especially with the rise of mental health. You hear a lot of like positive psychology, which all these kind of things are like fundamentally trying to drive positivity. And then by extension, kind of suppress other things, right? So suppress certain emotions as negative, and by extension say that they are bad. Right, but I come from a worldview that all emotions exist for a reason. They are here to signal us, to tell us what to do, and give us a bit more insights as to how we are feeling. And by extension, you must embrace all facets of emotion to then become a whole individual. That is my viewpoint. So today we're going to talk a little bit about, can negative emotions be good? So maybe we start with Mr. Positivity. Is there
I
actually...
felt like this
The
entire episode is
antithesis
against
of
me.
Come on, this whole episode is
Positivity.
on you,
Yeah.
right? Because you tell me you want to be Mr. Positive. It's like, well, I must talk about this one. Yes.
Okay, so thank you for the opportunity.
Yes.
So I belong to there was a very big phase of my life where I was really all about positivity, and today we have a word for it, which is called toxic positivity.
Yeah.
Right, because I mean. It's typical story, right? Where like, school days weren't good. I was bullied a lot. I didn't get the recognition I would love to get. And somehow it's a lot easier to not face the reality. And then I was introduced to the motivational scene, right? And I become a motivational junkie. Like, I would just go into those rooms, right? Thousands of people having a speaker telling us that, believe in yourself, you are the best, And because you don't hear that from the people that you care about, your parents, your friends will say, but suddenly a stranger say, you are good, you're meant to do big things. It is very addictive and it makes you feel good. So I was in that world for many, many years. Yeah.
But today you are also doing a lot of this kind of training, motivation.
Yeah.
Are you still a junkie in
So
that sense?
that was a journey for me.
Yes.
So I was in there, attending a lot of motivational talks, wanting to be successful, but for years I wasn't successful. I guess the only successful person is the speaker himself. Because we pay him
Hey, to
a
get
lot
the
of
addiction.
money. And my best friend, again, sometimes you just need a best friend to shake you up, and tell you the truth and say that I don't see any change in you. What?
醒醒吧.
Yeah, 你醒醒吧, right?
So
And-
brutal. I don't see any change in you.
Yeah, I mean, there's no change. You're just like being able to quote nice quotes.
Yeah.
And every time you screw up, you just have something nice to say about it, but you don't solve that problem. And she said, have you ever thought about it that you are the problem? Because everything that happened, you are the common denominator. Wow.
Ouch.
Wow, is she coming on set? Like we should totally...
We're not friends anymore.
Okay.
I'm kidding. So I thought that was the wake-up call. And that was when I start to look at the dark side and start to realize, I wish I was friends with Reggie, but it was years ago later that I learned that there's no such thing as good or bad, right? Emotions are just emotions. Emotions are teachers. and they're there to teach you. It's just that we do not know how to deal with the harder emotions like fear, disgust, guilt, pride. No one taught us how to deal with it. So how do we deal with it? We just bury it. So eventually, I went for a program to learn how to, learn to see those emotions, and that was when I realized that I had a lot of self-worth issues. Yeah, like I don't even love myself, and that's the reason why I seek love everywhere else. That's why I'm in very bad relationships. That's why I keep getting myself in very bad situations. So when I start learning about that disgust with myself and the anger with myself, and I start to deal with it. And that was when I realized that, it all boils back down to me just not having a very good relationship with myself. And so when I started healing, which is why if you can't feel it, you can't heal it, right? So if you feel those emotions...
Another quote.
Yeah, and ask yourself, why are you trying to teach me? Like, if sadness come to your doorstep, don't just slam the door. Ask like, okay, what do you want to teach me? And you would be able to pick up that lesson. And once the lesson comes and you acknowledge it, the emotion goes away. It's just a vehicle. So that was the training I went through. And then after going through it, then it's when I able to enjoy the entire rainbow of emotions. Yeah, and because of negative emotions, so let's not use the word negative, because negative is our judgment of it. So because of some of the more difficult emotions, you start to appreciate the nicer emotions,
Yes.
right? And so now, even though I name myself Mr. Positivity, because that's what people yearn for, but in order to be positive, you need to also be able to enjoy the negative, because both together then forms the real world.
Yeah.
So I use what people want to see as a way to attract, but the things I teach is exactly what I'm sharing with you right now.
Ultimate clickbait.
And I think
It's a clickbait,
Pixar, right? If
Yes.
you remember the movie,
Oh my God,
what's the title of that movie again?
Which
the
one?
one on
The few where-
emotions.
The blue sadness and the happy.
Yes, correct.
Wait,
And the
can someone
red-
help
The red
us?
color one is the...
Red anger, correct. Okay, I don't remember. Inside Out. Was
Inside
it?
Yes,
Out.
Inside
Yes.
Out. Oh
So
my God,
if we
yes.
remember that movie, remember how different emotions take charge at different situations.
Yes,
and if the situation warranting anger to be in control was not him, but someone else, that's
It will be
when
badly managed.
Yes.
yeah, correct.
yeah.
So I
And
think we
then
do
at
need
the end,
to give the
best
driving
memories
reins.
are those that is a mixture. It's
Exactly.
not pure red, pure blue, but it's a mixture.
Correct. Correct. And
Oh,
it's
maybe we should
when
watch this
the
show.
emotions are in harmony. I think that's the more important thing. You don't shut the door on all of the more difficult or negative ones, but help them to harmonize.
Because the whole idea is that if you shut it down, like pushing a ball into the water, it bounces back even higher.
Yeah.
So I guess at least my point of view is that if we learn how to deal with those difficult emotions, our life will be a lot more colorful and will be a lot more, I think we'll be more whole as a person.
So the first step is acknowledging and accepting negative emotions as normal.
Yep.
Yeah, instead of trying to push them away, which is what I think the narrative today in social media, it teaches you to ignore them, right? That's a problem.
Yeah.
But it's not. It's
Toxic
But
positivity.
it makes
Correct.
sense, like if let's say I'm managing people, right? And if I don't know how to teach them, okay, there are two ways of school of thought. One is that it's very nice for the leader to just say, look at the positive, and let's not look at the negative, because the negative is going to make you see the real world, and it is not nice, and I
You're
don't know how
gonna
to deal
fire
with
me.
it. Yeah, so that's one way of thought. Another way is because we don't know how to teach our guys how to deal with it. So a better thing to do is just don't talk about it.
Yeah. But the thing is, we as individuals, at least, we need to learn how to deal with it. Because these feelings are never going to go away.
Yeah.
And I mean, earlier on when you mentioned about how your whole journey throughout this, you never really knew how to deal with it, how to
Yeah.
manage it and not loving yourself. That is actually part of the generational baggage that we carry in our generation. Because if you
Share it
really
or
think
not,
about it, right? As a parent, I'm feeling it a lot more. Because I realized that when we yell, when we shout, when we get triggered, right? We say it's our kids who trigger us, but actually they're just kids. They trigger us because we don't know how to manage our emotions. And why do different sets of parents react so differently to the same sort of triggers?
Yes.
It's because whether or not they know how to manage it. And that's where we have the power to teach the next generation how to manage those. So as a kid, we were never taught that it was okay to cry.
Yeah.
Right? Our parents would say it's weak. Pick yourself up.
Cry baby.
Yeah,
Hong Kong.
cry baby,
Yeah.
exactly. And they say like, boys should not cry.
That's why boys live shorter lives, because they hold all back all their emotions. At least it's my point of view.
And that's the thing. thing, right? So if your parents had instead taught you differently, and it's not about blaming them because their generation probably didn't have access to so much information now as well. But if they had taught you differently, maybe you wouldn't have to go through all that years later on
100%.
learning how to deal with
So
it.
if there's one thing that we can do for our children and do for ourselves is to go for a class to learn about emotional intelligence, learning how to recognize, learning how to manage your own emotions, and more importantly, learning to not let people trigger you. Because
Yeah.
think about it, if everybody can trigger you, you are essentially a slave to all of them.
Exactly.
There's no freedom in that.
Link is in the description below.
Okay, we need to get a class, someone to teach
yeah,
it.
someone. Okay, but I think I want to echo Dawn's point about like last generation, right? Because I have heard lines with the older generation, maybe people in their 60s, 50s, and amongst them, I was like a side person sitting around, and then they will say like, 哎呀，现在的年轻人 a little bit feeling this, a little bit feeling that. Last time we what.
We just deal, right?
Yeah, we just
tahan.
tahan. Why is
Yeah, life is difficult, so what? It's like that one.
Yeah. All the young people today, right. No, but then when I look at them, they got like family problems, they quarrel with their wives, they comfort eat, they smoke forever, it's like there's a lot of things, and I'm not blaming them. I'm just recognizing that a lot of them are also coping with the situation just in a different way.
In unhealthy ways.
In a relatively unhealthy
Yeah.
way, right? And I think in the beauty that we can even put this topic out here today is that the tides are changing, right? People are recognizing that emotions are more well-rounded, and it's not just about believing or like happy and all those kind of things, right? So once and for all, you hear it today on Wise and Shine that we're on consensus, right? That
Yep.
no emotion is positive or negative. They all serve a certain purpose.
Yeah. And it show you what you need to work on. I'll give you an example. When I was working out, right, exercising, it was very stressful for me to lift a certain weight. Okay, I was like doing 2.5 kg and I sprained my whole back down.
my
I couldn't even
God.
sleep and I was out of it for like 2 months, So after recovering from that and going back to the regime, it was still very physically and emotionally stressful for me because I kept thinking of that injury. And at the same time, it was very difficult, physically stressful. But the more I did it, the easier it became. And one day, it's just magically disappeared. That feeling of stress just disappeared. I was no longer worried about injuring myself because I already knew what not to do in order not to get injured. And the 2.5 kg suddenly became too light. And that was when I told my husband, I need to go to Decathlon and buy heavier weights. And then I picked up the 5 kg. Like, oh no, this is so difficult. And then Taryn began the journey with a 5 kg weight versus 2.5 kg. So if we didn't feel that stress, that negative emotion, how would we know? If we don't feel that pain, and pain is our body telling us, stop. You have crossed the limit. You now need to recover. How would we know?
Yeah.
If we just suppress the pain and continue doing it, we pay the price later on.
I think there's a lot of that kind of learnings that we can work with our body as much as working with our emotions, right? So I think let's take today to talk a little bit about some of these emotions that people constitute as negative and kind of break it down to see what is their value, right? Maybe we start with anger, right? What does anger tell you? How do you work with anger such that it's valuable for you, like it being a good emotion?
I think anger implies boundaries. Because when you're angry at something, it means that someone has stepped into your boundary. And actually, a lot of us do not know our own boundaries, and that's why we keep letting everybody push us around, right? So the minute next time you feel anger, rather than being upset about being angry or letting anger take you over, you become She-Hulk or Hawk out, right?
Now might be a really good time for you to get angry.
I'm always angry.
Tell yourself, oh, okay, someone have kind of infringed on my boundary. What's that? What that boundary is? Learn from it, and in future, communicate your boundary in advance so that you're not going to get triggered.
Yeah. Anger can also be about injustice. You feel angry because you think something should be the way it should be, but yet it is not.
And that is your boundary in that sense. Would you call that?
That
Yeah.
line, right? Which
Yeah.
is, this is what we should be doing for people, but when people sidestep that, that's what
Yeah.
get triggered.
Exactly. Or you think like, the world should be in this model, but people do things that are not like that, and yet they get rewarded, they don't get punished for it. You feel angry because like, I'm doing all the right things. Why is he or she doing the wrong thing and not being caught? And then, yeah.
But right and wrong is also a moral judgment, right,
Yeah.
on the situation. So how then do you... Okay, because I get it that everybody has their own moral structures, right? That in your worldview, there is something right, there's something wrong. But for me, I come from a view that there's no inherent... That means there's no like flat like this is right or that is wrong, right? Everybody has their own texture to it. And sometimes you are put into a situation where you may think that this is right, but the broader community or the broader group or broader society think that this is wrong.
Exactly.
Right? So then how would you manage something like that?
I think it's experience, learning how to potentially communicate better. Sometimes maybe not even talking. Like if you think the persons or the people cannot be convinced otherwise, then just don't waste your breath. It's like the Keanu Reeves meme, don't never argue with idiots. Then he goes on to say 1 + 1 = 5. You're right.
You're right, Dawn. You're right.
but that in itself is also a very privileged way, right? In the sense that you can actually walk out. Like you have the power to walk out, but
but not
sometimes
all of us.
not all of us. Sometimes we are stuck in the system. We're stuck at work. Like the work kind of ticks all these different other needs of ours. But when it comes to like the company culture, maybe not so good. Some things I don't agree with my boss, and I keep getting triggered. And how would you recommend?
So you see, it's very
managing this?
interesting, right? We earlier mentioned the context is every emotion is like a messenger, it has a message, and I also believe that the message comes with a gift. So just now, since anger, it's about boundaries, then the gift is courage. That I feel that our way of responding is we respond in anger because we have no courage or we don't have the courage to go and speak up for ourselves, to stand up for ourselves.
Or to change something.
Yeah, to change status quo. And yes, no doubt it's a boss, whoever it is, but we gave power away. So that's the lesson, that's the gift, that if we can slowly start to have more courage, and boundary is always like this, you can start with a small thing. So for example, when people ask you, hey, buy me a cup of coffee, but you don't feel like doing it, small step. You know what, hey, actually, I don't plan to go to Starbucks, it's inconvenient, can you do it yourself? That's a small step to speaking up for yourself. And when you start speaking up for yourself, you realize that anger doesn't need to step in to help you because you have already helped yourself.
Yeah.
Actually, that's great. You just reminded me of something that happened last year or maybe 1.5 years ago. So I went through this period where I was yelling at my kid all the time. He went through the terrible twos, and we called it the terrible twos. It's not them being terrible. It's actually just the kids learning how to deal with the emotion, because that's when they start to feel it, and it's their first time feeling such emotion, so they don't know how to manage it, and it's our job as parents to help them. However, it was triggering me so much. Like he was annoying me and getting on my nerves, and I kept yelling at him. And then I felt so angry for myself after that. I would yell at him, and then for the rest of the night I cannot sleep. Because I would be so mad at myself. Why did I have to yell at my poor kid? And then when I see him cry, his face just broke because his mommy yelled at him. Like he doesn't understand what he did wrong. And I was like, why couldn't I have been the bigger person? And that went on for like months before I finally admitted. But now that you gave a word to it, courage. Maybe it was courage to finally admit that I was in the wrong, that I just hadn't parented well enough. And even though I think like I knew a lot about parenting, I just clearly didn't. And that was what woke me up to go and seek the answers. Today, I still yell at my kids sometimes. He still triggers me. But the good thing is that it's a lot lesser. Because I've learned to recognize the signs. I've learned to be more empathetic in those situations. Like when he yells at me, he beats me. I used to think, wow, beating is bad, and you make me pay, I hit you back. It's a very instinctive thing, right? But now, I recognize that, when we feel anger, we just feel this, frustration, this ball of energy. And as adults, we can take the stress ball, push it, or we moderate our emotions in other ways. We think calmer thoughts to get rid of those. The children don't know. So they just lash out, not because they want to hurt us, but because they can't help themselves. And once I recognize that, it takes a lot to recognize it in the moment though. Yeah. Someone hits you and you have to stop your hand because you're like, no, he's just lashing out. He's not deliberately hurting me. But to be able to do that is also a skill. And the more I do it, I realize I get less angry myself. So now when I yell at him, I don't get so angry that I cannot sleep anymore. I just mull over it for a while and I think I'm angry at myself for having yelled at him again. But what can I do better if this situation repeats? How can I prolong that empathy that I would feel?
Yeah, and I would say actually this is a two-part process, right? First part is you feeling the anger, so that's a body signal. Right? The second part is how you react to that body signal.
Yeah.
Right. So actually, if you train yourself over time, you can actually separate those.
Yeah,
you can separate them. Right. In the sense that, okay, I'm feeling angry. Like why? Right? Maybe this person has crossed my boundary. I do come from that camp that so when someone crosses your boundary and make you feel unsafe, right? Actually, for all sorts of reasons, they can make you feel unsafe. They're challenging your worldview. They are challenging your work worth, they are stepping on your boundary. Once you feel unsafe, anger comes in, right? And you feel it, right? Because you want to defend yourself. Right? That's how I look at it. But how I then react to the situation, that is a step 2. And then I can decide on my level, why do I want to take this down a different path, right? And I want to echo the part about drawing boundaries, because very interesting. You know, if you always do it and then suddenly you don't do something, let's say you always buy coffee for your friend, and one day you don't buy coffee, say, hey, why you like that one? You know, like, why you don't buy coffee? They're not feeling well, huh? You know, but I'm the kind that I don't do it. I just don't do it. And after a while, people be like, yeah, he's like that.
Then why you ask me to get coffee for you just now?
Yeah, that's true.
Segue. No, but the idea here is, if you're consistent, people take it as this is the person.
This is the norm.
This norm. This is how it is. He's like that, right?
That's why I think he said it. It takes courage to show that that is not
to
the
build
norm.
that boundary.
Correct.
It's difficult, especially in a world where, you know, for the longest time, I think we come from a position where a lot of us maybe come from more peasant working class family, you know, and our parents work in such an environment where it's like, okay, agreeable, be nice, be do that, you know, because I met a lot of people that come from like ruling class family, like atas, you know, businessman family, right? No, they're not like that one. To them, no means no. No need share one. You want, I buy one more for you. Right, so they have a very different worldview based on where they come from and their thought processes. So I do think a lot of the people that come from working class family or peasant families do struggle with this, especially when you want to break further. You know, because if you're okay with it, then you continue to kind of be in this group. It's okay, right? But if you want to break further, you want to take control, you want to expand a little bit, or you move into higher management, right? And you have to start to be a little bit more, you know, flexing of what your ideas are, you know, what you're trying to do here. Because now you're expected to lead, you're not just expected to follow. And then some of these ideas have to go. And one of the ideas that I think needs to happen is to draw boundaries.
And just how you mentioned about, you know, our tendency is to suppress, right? Or we try to, basically suppression, which is why sometimes you see parents, bosses, or human beings suddenly lashed out on you, and you thought he or she is crazy. It's not. It's just that it's the last straw that breaks the back.
Yeah.
So one of the things. So number one, I like it that never ever judge anger as a bad thing. Understand that as a lesson, but you have to also learn to dispel it, learn to express it. So you can talk to someone who is willing to give you the environment and the space, a safe environment to express. Do your journaling so that the anger doesn't become a physical reaction. Then I think everybody will be safe around you.
Yeah. But aside from anger, what's another negative emotion?
Yeah, exactly, right. So what? Maybe envy. Do you think? I think people think envy is a negative emotion.
Maybe jealousy.
Envy, disgust, some of these things.
I think that's a very clear-cut one, right? Because when you feel jealous or envious of someone or something, it just means you want something that you don't have. So once you recognize that, don't hate the person for having
I will
it.
ask the person why you have it, how you get it. I want
exactly.
that thing.
Ask how did you get it, and then work on it to get there.
Mindset law. Scarcity mindset.
And it leads to a lot of pagro behavior, like passive aggressive. It's like, okay, like that one, the person don't know do what, sleep with who or what, you know, that kind of stuff. Right?
Justify.
Exactly. Oh my god, so there's always that kind of thing. But I do think like envy is a great signal to tell us that actually we want this.
Yeah. It's one of my best motivating factors actually. Whenever I find myself envying someone, I'll look back reflect and then think, what is it exactly about them or their life that I like? How can I get it? And if I don't have access to that person, because not everyone will tell you their secret, or some people are just not accessible because like there's some high up celebrity or some politician, you know, then what we can do is try to find clues in things that they post or in different parts of their life that may have helped them to get there.
Or we can get them on the show.
And then learn from them. So it's very good, huh? If you look at it that way, then you don't hate yourself for being jealous or envious.
I think that's a very...
And you know, the problem with envy and jealous is we don't take action. So we continue to be envious and jealous. And it becomes a negative cycle, right?
It's like people who just keep thinking, he or she has it good because he's born in a rich family lah. Or, he or she can hustle because the family rich ma, that's why I can go and do this job.
And when you do that, you're cursing yourself. Because you have just limited yourself to achieving it. That's why you say like you see someone is rich and then you're like you envy the person and you hate the person. And if your body, by the way, psychologically, your body, your being will never let you be the person that you hate.
No, but I think the precursor has basis. When people say that, right? Oh, they can do this because the family is wealthy. Yeah, that is a precursor, right? And I think that point of view is valid. You know, the challenge comes when you just sink in that point of view and then you don't do anything.
Yeah,
Exactly, you don't take
correct.
action.
Right. So, but now that you recognize that it's because the person is wealthy, that's why they can open a cafe and kelka every day, right? And then not a lot of people come in, it's fine. Then the pursuit will be to accumulate that wealth,
Yes.
such that you can then do
A lot
these
more
other
constructive,
things, right?
yeah.
So it's a lot more constructive than just kind of drowning in all those kind of envy and
And the key thing
jealousy.
is don't hate it, because envy, the next neighboring emotion, BFF, is hate. Because I envy, I can't have it, so I must hate it so that it justify me not having it.
It's the green color one in the movie, right? And I think it's also like
Is it
the
because we always say
so-called
green
bad.
with envy, right?
yeah,
That's why,
exactly.
I think that's why. And then don't be so blue, which is sadness, Like, wow, his face so red, that's why anger, right? I guess that's how you.
So let's talk a little bit about sadness.
Oh,
like
God.
sadness is the one in the room, right? Because it's like
Invisible
the thing
one.
about sadness is it doesn't project on others.
No.
Right, so sadness rarely projects on others.
inwards.
Right, it's very inward. Right, whereas a lot of people talk about anger because like it's outward. So I feel like I'm attacked. So people always talk about anger as a defensive mechanism. Say, hey, why are you so angry? You know, so then there's quite a lot of text and coverage around anger and trying to manage it. But sadness is one of those things that, especially in a society where you just gotta buckle up, right, and then you just hustle your way through. Sadness is not really discussed, you know. But what is sadness? How does sadness work for you? How is it good in your view?
I can think of one time in my life when I broke up, obviously, with my first serious boyfriend. I was very, very sad for a long time after we broke up. What it taught me was that I wanted someone who didn't have certain characteristics. And later on in my subsequent relationships, I would look out for that more so than other characteristics. I don't know if that would be what sadness helped me to realize, because I mean, if I wasn't sad, I was happy about the breakup, then I probably wouldn't have discovered that.
Yes, and that's the part that I think I do have an answer for this, right? In my worldview, sadness is the energy to use a fine comb to look within, okay? Because it takes a lot of energy to try to focus and look within. Right? It's just like it takes a lot of energy to do anything if you want to focus. So sadness is the energy to help you focus within. And grief is just the extension of that sadness. It gets to another level, you grieve. Right? So when I'm sad, my head is just replaying the saga. What's happening? So I'm fine combing through all the happenings. And in that process of fine combing, I can pick up a lot more ideas, a lot more insights as to why am I feeling this way? What can I do better? You know, what are some things that are circumstantial that, you know, no matter how I adjust, it doesn't change the circumstance, right? So when I look at it that way, sadness is just the ability, is the energy that gives you that ability and gets you into the context to look within. Right? Because it takes a lot. It takes a lot to like comb and look through this whole thing, and you must be sad to do that. No other emotion gives you that basis to do that. Happiness, when you're happy, you don't care about it. Right? Anger, you will blame others, you won't look at yourself. Envy, you know, is this feeling of like lack, right? You try to copy the other person or you just hate on them. But sadness
It's inward.
is that energy that keeps you in. And then you think, and then you keep looking at it. Like, sometimes you do drown in that sadness because you kind of draw ideas from this saga that it's not helpful to move forward. But if you learn to work with sadness, then you realize that it helps you pull out all this information within the saga of what's happening, and then how do you like reframe or like put it together so that you can move forward.
I was trying to think back, where was the last memory I had, which I was like,
Yeah,
really
Mr.
sad.
Positivity.
Yeah,
when
and
were
I
you
struggle
last
with that,
sad?
actually. I'm struggling because I'm like thinking. So I thought that, okay, I'm sure I do cry in movies and all that, but that aside.
But that's not sad.
Yeah, that aside, I think there was one very clear memory I had was during army. Remember after army?
我们是 different batch 的. Okay, please continue, please.
Yeah, I remember on the last day of army, right? You graduate by walking 50 kilometers or 70 kilometers. I forgot how much.
Wait, are
already.
you in the commando?
No, CISPAC. So
CISPAC,
sergeants,
okay,
right? So we have
sergeants.
to walk that thing. But I suffered in army because I'm not a physically strong person. Like, you want to do well in army, at least during my time, if you're physically strong, you can do 5-10 pull-ups, you can wake up earlier, you can run miles. You will do generally very well. But I was physically weak. I could not do any pull-ups. So army was suffering for me. And I remember crying a lot every time I call home, I'll cry. I say, I don't like this place. I'm not comfortable. And my mom will try to like make me feel better. But my dad gets increasingly upset with me. To the extent that he would just scold me and say, don't be a kunyang, you know. And that was very upsetting and very sad. And then I remembered, I told myself, okay, I don't want, you know, all of us want to make our dad proud, right? I don't think that okay, at least me, I want to make my dad proud. And even my mom gave up on me. She gave up because she have lost all her patience with me. Say, boy, I also don't know what to say to you already. You really got to man up. Such words, you know, man up, kunyang, all this kind of thing. Then I remembered, I told myself, I must make it at that 72 kilometers because I know I'm not good with stamina. So I really, you know, guilt myself up, and I did it. And then I was at a ceremony, and your dad supposed to go down and put a cap on. I'll never forget that moment when he went down, didn't even give me eye contact, took a cap, just slammed it on my head and walked off. I will always remember that moment. Yeah,
And
I'm
that
feeling
made you
this
very
emotion.
sad.
Like, I feel sad. I feel heartbroken.
Because your efforts and your achievement was not
Which is,
acknowledged.
yes, and if you go deeper, then what's the lesson behind it? The lesson behind it is there's always already a wound there. There's always that inadequacy there, and you are sad because that person kind of reminded you about that. So I think sadness, it's an inward journey to help you look at your inadequacies that doesn't matter why they were there, but they are there, and it gives you an opportunity to heal. Yeah, so it was a very long process for me. I didn't have a very good relationship with my dad, but I remember going through a process where I was reminded of that memory and I cried. And I tell you, tears, crying is such a taboo again during my time, right? Like boys don't cry. So I joked just now that that's why boys die early. I'll ask you a question. When you see your friend cry, what's the most immediate thing you take up?
I'll just give that friend a hug.
Okay, that's nice. You, if you see someone cry, what you do?
Are you okay? Like,
Okay, good. Okay, I noticed myself back then when I see someone cry, immediately I take tissue paper. And you give it, and tissue paper is an emotion
crying.
plug, it's a butt plug, it's bad. Right? Because we don't know how to deal with the
some will argue
emotions.
butt plug is not bad. We don't go there. Yeah.
We are PG-13.
So, like, because that sadness is so hard to deal with, because your sadness forces me to look at my sadness, forces me to look at the things I'm unhappy and my wounds. I don't want that, so I'm going to give you a tissue, make you not cry, and hug you or whatever, so that you stop crying. That's generally how we deal with it.
Yeah. Don't cry.
Yeah, don't cry lah. It's okay. It's not okay, and you should not tell a person that it's okay, right?
I mean, these days I tell people grieve well.
Yeah, cry. Like, cry hard.
Yeah,
But
give them space
Yeah,
to-
give them space to cry and tell them it's okay to cry. Let it out. But importantly is, what were you crying about? That is a very important question. What were you crying about? Because when you ask that question, what are you crying about? Not why are you crying, you know, just what are you crying about? Then the lesson appears. So I'm crying about how, you know, I make my dad, you know, not like me. I cry about how I cannot live up to my dad's standard because I want my dad to be proud of me. You know what's my healing process? When I went to my dad, I told my dad about that situation, and I said I felt I'm useless. He said, no, I'm just sad that, you know, you're like that. I don't want you to suffer. That I'm proud of you. The minute he said that, that wound healed.
You were able to heal.
And then my relationship with my dad got restored. So I think sadness is an inward journey, exactly what Reggie said, to help us look at some of the wounds that were not healed and to give us an opportunity to go heal those wounds.
I want to raise another interesting perspective that you brought up. When was the last time, all of you guys, not just both of you, but even the listeners, when was the last time you truly felt sad? Second question then, do you realize you feel sad more as a child in your younger years versus when you're older?
Oh, yeah. That's why we cry more when we're a kid, right?
Yeah,
'Cause
and
it's
why
okay to be
so?
sad, right?
Why is it that children feel sad more and that just kind of disappeared as we went along? Was it because we suppressed it?
Yeah, exactly.
Really?
We thought it was okay to be sad, so we are
I think
sad.
that's one view of that, but
Yeah.
I also think the other view is that as you grow older, you recognize that you have abilities to change the situation.
That's what I was driving at.
Yes, so you have more control over it.
Yes.
and
when you have, as you earn and gain that control with age, you then put yourself in situations whereby you can exercise that control so
Yes.
you don't feel sad.
Yes,
It's
yes.
like when you feel sad after a bad breakup, you put yourself in situations so that you don't have to go through such toxic relationship and hence breakups anymore.
yeah,
But that's where the distinction comes in. Like, I had a big breakup, I'm gonna eat lots of chocolate to make myself feel better, right? But but that's not looking into sadness. That's just helping to feel a little bit
That's
better.
just dealing with the symptom and not the, root
symptoms, exactly.
cause.
Yeah. So that's why I feel that if you are sad about your breakup, there is a reason, right? Maybe I'm not you, so I do not know. Maybe it's that he rejected a part of you that you yourself also rejected that you did not accept, and it forces you to have to look at what's the parts that you have not accepted.
Yeah.
And that journey itself is a healing journey. And if we actually go through it, and then we'll come up a little bit more whole. And anyway, we attract what we are, right? And then we start to attract a better relationship.
Yeah. And to be clear, as a lifelong comfort eater, speaking from a lifelong comfort eater, I recognize that it is merely a tool to help me feel a little bit better at that point in time. But they can coexist. That means I can cope and at the same time take it as a signal that something is happening and then solve it. Right? And instead of judging yourself because you're coping.
Yes.
Right, so because that just makes it even more complicated, right? But I also recognize that prolonged coping will then lead to other effects, right? Whether is it you are a comfort eater, you drink, you smoke, you go to the gym or whatever, or because people are addicted. I believe addiction comes from many different ways, but all from the same root, right? So if you judge yourself for that addiction to help you feel better, it just makes the situation more complicated, right? But that is a whole different discussion altogether.
When it comes to sadness, right, I realize there are two types that we can't really do much about. The first is as a parent, when your kid makes you feel very sad. Yeah, and sometimes you just have to live and deal with it. I'll give you an example.
Yes,
when I sent my kid to preschool, separation anxiety, he was so heartbroken. And it took him 2 months before he stopped crying. Everyone around me was saying, oh, your kid will get used to it after 2 weeks. No, man, 2 months later, he was still crying. I still have those photos in my phone. Once in a while, I look back. Looking at his teary face that his teacher sent me during that stage still makes me very sad now. And I remember my husband said this very illuminating statement to me then. So what you want to do about it? And then I answered him, there's nothing I can do about it. What do you want me to do? Take him out of school? But that's going to be long-term damaging. I can't help him to not feel sad either because it's natural that he feels worried and anxious about whether his parents are going to come pick him up. It's not like he has a handphone to call us, But I just have to live and deal with my own sadness and teach him that it's okay to feel sad. We will still come and pick you up. And eventually, that passed. And now he's super happy about going to school. He no longer feels that sadness about school. And I don't feel sad having to send him to school anymore because he enjoys it. So that's one instance when someone else's emotions transfers to you because you love the person, but yet you can't do anything about their situation to help them out of it. Yeah, and sometimes it's not helpless, but I could have taken him out of school, but that would not have done him any good in the long term.
Understand.
The other one is what you said earlier, grief. What if grief when you lose a loved one? When someone loses their loved one, what can we do about it? Is there anything to learn? I think there's nothing to learn, right?
I have come to a position that when someone is grieving, I stand around.
Yeah.
I don't intervene.
Correct.
So I'll be like, I'm here for you. You don't need to do anything at this point in time. Grieve well, feel it, and if you need a support, I'm here. Right? So that is giving them the assurance that they are not alone and just kind of be at the peripheral to watch out. Because you don't want to interject that grief process.
Yeah.
It may create frozen grief situations where down the road, it's even worse. So because I have met people that have been in a frozen grief situation and then they're just endlessly coping for all sorts of reasons, right? And so my view is if you're grieving grief, right, and you will get all these bouts of emotions, they do come, they disturb you, they come and go. And as a friend or as someone that cares sufficiently about the person, just be around. No? So I'll be around. You need me, you let me know. I give you the permission to ask. But I also ask for your permission to be around.
Yeah.
Right? And then we kind of go through this. There's no linear process.
Flow with it.
Yeah, flow with it. Rather than try too hard to suppress it. Yeah, okay, great. Oh my God.
So I think the thing about sadness, right, I think to really also emphasize is that only in times of sadness, then you appreciate the happiness that you have. And you won't appreciate happiness as much if you did not have that sadness.
Relative, yes. There is some relativity in
Correct. And everything works in relative terms, right? If you don't have a basis of comparison, it's harder to feel happy about your situation.
In closing for that, right, I think the relativity of emotions is also a kind of, you can kind of take that from a view of how your palate also change over time. When you're younger, kids love sweets. As you move on, you learn different flavors. Your palate also evolve. Same with emotions. Over time, your palate for emotions also evolve, and you start to be able to appreciate nuance and some of these other things. And I think that anchors the relativity of emotions, right?
And as you learn how to control more, anger may not always have the pilot seat. Other emotions start to take control
Yeah,
more.
yeah, and
Love it.
work
New
with them,
perspective.
work with the emotions. I think at the end, emotions are like your palette, right? Your color palette. You work with them,
Get
you know.
colours to
Yeah,
your life.
they work with you, and yeah, please sponsor us, Pixar. Yeah. In closing, any last lines? One thing that you have.
Does that inspire
Yeah.
Mr. Positivity to start talking
to start talking about all these
negative
other things,
emotions
yes.
on your TikTok?
I am already doing that
Yeah.
because TikTok is very much championing mental wellness and for good, right? And to not just keep the positive emotions and hide the negative emotions.
So they email you, hey, Mr. Positivity, can you don't be so positive? Because I know the
I
TikTok
get
guys,
that.
they do
Yeah,
that. Yes,
I
yes,
get
yes,
that.
yes.
But that I mean that comes from a place because they don't understand, that they don't know how to deal with their own negative emotions, right? So they felt that maybe I'm being inauthentic. So it's perfectly understandable. I think my biggest takeaway today for even knowing all this is that emotions are neither good nor bad. They're there to teach us a lesson. If we can see that way, we will accept them, and then we will, and then we will feel it. And as I said before, if you can't feel it, you can't heal. And pick up the lessons. That's my takeaway.
Done. Any amongst all the things that we've discussed, which we talked quite a lot today, what is one thing that you take away from that you didn't come in with?
I think it was interesting figuring out that different emotions teach us different. And I always thought that every emotion teaches us something. But during our conversation today, I realized sadness doesn't necessarily teach us something. It just helps us to appreciate.
Yeah, I feel like a
things
mirror.
more.
It shows you your wounds.
It shows,
And
yes.
it helps you appreciate the rest of the other.
Exactly. So I
Happier
love what you
emotions.
said about
Yeah.
it being an energy that focuses you on your internal world. Yeah, that was the best part of it because I very seldom feel sad. So to have that brought out during today's discussion and think back, why did I feel sad? What could I have learned from that moment of sadness? And I realized there were just some periods where you can't learn anything, but it's really just that reflection.
Yeah, great. And I actually love that. I love that one line. If you don't feel it, you can't heal.
Yeah, if you
Yeah,
can't feel
that
it,
needs to be
yeah.
our quote
Yeah,
for this
if you-
episode.
For
If
this
you,
episode.
hashtag if you don't feel, you can't heal. Right.
Yeah.
So and because I'm not a big fan of one-liners.
But you're a fan of this?
Yeah, exactly,
Nice.
exactly.
Wow.
I hate one-liners because I think one-liners they are too succinct, and when they're too succinct, they don't help you go through. But of course, over time, I realize one-liners have their function, right? As a reminder, and as someone that's kind of spent a lot of effort in trying to understand emotions and all these kind of things,
Yeah.
I thought that was a great
Oh
one-liner.
man, nice, great.
Yeah, thank you all.
Thank you
Thanks
all,
for tuning
guys.
in to Wise and Shine, and we look forward to hearing from you next week.
Yes, and hopefully the emotions that our episodes trigger is always happiness.
Hey, so much for there's no negative emotions there. But yeah, if you have if you have stories to share with us, please drop it in the comment section, and then maybe we could do one of those episodes where we kind of take out the stories
Oh,
and
that would be
talk,
very
and
good
then
to share
just
your
kind of
story
share
with
our
everyone
perspective,
else.
share our ideas.
I'm
right? So-
actually really interested on the sadness stories
Yeah,
because I
yeah.
realized, after we hit a certain age, we don't feel it as much.
I do share that viewpoint because you're more in
I
more
never realized
control.
until he was talking about his story.
Interesting. Okay, drop it in the comment section. We'll see all of you next week. Bye.